well if it pops up somewhere.
Hi, we're live. Yay! And welcome to this event for Salt Magic with Hope Larson, Rebecca Mock, and Ethan M Aldridge. I'm Carter. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the event coordinator here at Astoria Bookshop, the bookshop hosting this event. So if you don't know who we are because you found us through, say, the magic of the internet, we are a bookshop in Astoria, Queens. And yes, if you do order the book in that link down at the bottom, we can ship it to your house wherever you are. So you don't need to be in New York City, in Queens, in Astoria at all to get this book. So before we get started, I just want to go through just a couple of housekeeping things. You will have the opportunity to ask questions during the last 10-ish minutes of this. If you have questions throughout, put them in the Ask a Question function right down there at the bottom of the screen. And you can chat with one another in that chat over on the right. I'm pointing to it over there. We will kick you out if you participate in any trolling or any racial, ethnic, or homophobic slurs. Basically, we ask you all to be nice and respectful towards one another. Finally, there is that button down at the bottom with the option to buy a copy of Salt Magic, which I highly recommend. And I think after these three talk, you are going to want to press that button. So you might as well press it now, have the page open. Just saying. So let's get things started, and I will introduce these fantastic authors. Hope Larson, who uses she, her pronouns, has written and illustrated many graphic novels, including All Summer Long, which was a Kirkus Review's Best Book of 2018 and an Eisner Award nominee, as well as its recently published sequel, All Together Now. She adapted and illustrated A Wrinkle in Time, the graphic novel, which spent 44 weeks on the New York Times graphic novel bestseller list, and for which she has won an Eisner Award. She is also the author of Compass South, the New York Times bestseller, and its companion novel, Knife's Edge, both illustrated by Rebecca Mock. She lives in North Carolina. Rebecca Mock uses she, they pronouns, is an illustrator and comics artist. They illustrated the graphic novels Compass South and Knife's Edge, both written by Hope Larson. Their work has also appeared in various publications, including the New York Times and the New Yorker. They are the co-organizer of the Hanadoki Kira anthology. They live in Brooklyn, New York. Ethan M Aldridge uses he, they pronouns, is a New York Times bestselling illustrator and author. He was raised in a very small town in Utah. Growing up, his favorite things to draw were ghosts, monsters, and whatever dinosaur he liked most that week. He now does more or less the same thing for a living. Ethan lives in New York City with his husband, Matthew, and dog, Kitson. So, thank you and welcome, all of you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for having us.
I'll let the three of you take over so you guys can start talking.
All right, we will see you back here in a bit. Well, Rebecca, Hope, hello. I'm so excited to be talking to you both. Congratulations on Salt Magic. It's a beautiful book. I'm so excited to be here talking with you both about it. How are you both feeling? We're pretty close to release week. How's it been going?
I think we're in week 2 of release, or
yeah,
I guess week 1 really.
About 1 week out from release.
One full week. I'm feeling good.
I feel crazy every day.
Yes. Releasing
yes.
a book right now is definitely a unique experience. Though, thankfully, with the magic of live casting, we get to have a nice audience for it. So I wanted to start talking a little bit about Salt Magic. It looks like it's reversed on my screen, but you'll have to read backwards.
It looks perfect. It looks
perfect.
Non-mirrored.
Yeah.
Amazing. So Salt Magic tells the story of Von Seal. She's the youngest family of a rather large family in rural Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. The story picks up right after, or I guess right when Von Seal's eldest brother comes home from war. He's a very different person than the brother that Von Seal knew and was very close to. He's scarred both physically and emotionally from the war. And what's more, he's also sort of, while he was overseas, managed to get on the bad side of a witch named Greta, she's this amazing, glamorous, sort of powerful woman. She curses the entire family farm, and it falls to Von Seal to try and untangle that curse. Soul Magic is really amazing. It combines a lot of different kinds of genres. I think you've got a very sort of classic oral fairy tale feel. It's very reminiscent of like classic children's books. I think the Oz books are a pretty easy comparison.
Yeah.
Also classic Westerns, Dust Bowl drama. There's a little bit of gothic horror at a couple points. I was wondering if we could go one than the other. I guess we'll start with Hope about talking about the process of combining all those different kinds of genre flavors into a cohesive story.
Yeah, this is a book that just kind of came together. It felt like on its own. It came together really fast, the initial outline. I ended up outlining it in one night, which is not the norm for me at all.
Wow.
You're a writer as well, right? So,
yeah,
that's
more than
that's
a night
rare.
is my average. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it kind of came to me. It involves a few bits and pieces of projects that I've worked on in the past that didn't ever quite gel. Von Seal is named after a woman who I did a lot of research on, who was a rodeo rider and a wannabe actress in the 20s. And the name came from her. But as far as all the disparate elements of the story coming together, that's how it came to me. And I knew that it was wonky, a little unusual. It's kind of like got that story within a story thing that I've played with a couple of times in me and Rebecca's other books. But I take that a lot further this time around. I don't know. This felt like an opportunity to break some of the rules of writing that I've sort of set for myself, and just go for it. And I think it totally works.
I think so too. I think it's a really cohesive story, and I think a lot of that has to do with the visuals. Now, I know just from my own research that this was a book that the visuals and the story very much grew up together. I think I had heard somewhere that Hope, you shared the outline with Rebecca, and then while the script was being created, Rebecca was working on concept art and sending visuals back and forth. Rebecca, can you talk a little bit about about finding that visual feel for Salt Magic?
Yeah, it's true. Hope sent me maybe not the first version of the outline, but a very early version, and that was the version that like inspired my creative fervor for this story. And I felt like similarly, I had like a vision of like what I wanted it to look like. Sort of overall, I felt like I wanted it to have that like classic storybook feel. I wanted the magic to be very sparkly and vivid, but the like specifics of like what the characters looked like and stuff, I didn't have a clear idea for a while. And so I was developing those while Hope was working on the various drafts of the script, which I would get the different versions of every time she sort of sent them to our editor. I would also get to read them, so it was like a juicy treat. I would make notes, and then I would also send her all of my sketches, which I have them. I would keep them in folders. This one's labeled Greta, and there would just be like sketch after sketch after sketch, which you cannot see at all. There they are.
There you go.
It goes. Beautiful.
Yes.
Basically
Oh my gosh,
making
I remember.
notes.
I remember you sending those specific ones to me, and I was so excited about them.
Anytime there was like, it's true that this book was like an opportunity to break lots of different rules, and I really had fun with sort of going crazy with like the fantasy elements in a way that I had never done before in any other projects. The same way that you were going for a new type of story when you were writing it, Hope. I think it comes through that we both had a lot of fun.
It feels that way. It feels very light. It feels very fresh. Rebecca, I think you're someone in the industry who is, in addition to comics, you also do a lot of freelance illustration. You've done it for a lot of journalistic sources. You're sort of pioneering a lot of like the art of the animated GIF right now. I feel like you're someone who is really well known for sort of crafting your visual style to go with the look of a project.
Right.
Whereas like for someone like me, I sort of have the look I do, and I sort of gravitate towards stories that suit the look that I can do. You're someone who really likes to sort of adapt as you go. I think a good comparison, just keeping it within your two's collaborations, you know, I feel like Salt Magic has sort of an airier, kind of more diaphanous look than Compass South or Knife's Edge, which is a bit more like tight, a little more sort of solid colors. You know, dark shadows.
Very heavy lines in Compass South and Knife's Edge. Lots of brushwork.
Now, how much?
Yeah, it feels very inky, and Salt Magic feels like not pencil really, but it's more in that direction than
a little more kind of light watercolor style.
Yeah, definitely dry media a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of softer tones. How much of that was conscious decisions of you picking textures and colors to go with the story, and how much of it was just in the process of visual development, you sort of feeling out what felt right?
I think some of it has to do with like our initial conversations, like me and Hope, like reading over the outline. Hope, actually, I forgot about this, and I remembered because I went through my bookcase this weekend. You sent me these books that were from the time period, these like kids books that had short stories. They're readers, basically. They were for kids to learn to read. And they had little like old-timey illustrations in them. That they were.
Oh wait, yes, I do. Yeah,
right?
the one boats or something.
I got a one on boats. There was one that was basically like little like nursery rhymes essentially, and they had little illustrations that came with them.
Amazing.
They were just like black and white drawings. So that was like my first sort of visual cue. It's like, okay, this. Then the other one that we discussed was the comic strip Gasoline Alley. Yes.
Yeah. Sure.
So stylistically, these were like the touchstones that Hope sent to me and that I started with. And I wanted to hold true to that feeling of like old-timey classic illustrations for kids. This like period sort of slice of life comic from the time. And beyond that, it was really just like fluffiness and sort of softness was like in the back of my mind when I was drawing everything. Probably that informs a bit of sort of the pillowiness of a lot of the characters and settings, like the pillowiness of the trees.
Sure.
Sort of like there's a distinct way that I was trying to tie that into other things.
Well, there's a lot of like echoes of that too, right? You have like the clouds and like the bits of dust that get kicked up by carts and horses. Yes. Right? It's like there's the whole thing feels very soft.
Yeah, I don't think anybody has brought up Little Nemo. Yeah.
Oh, yes, of course.
It's got a very strong Little Nemo vibe.
Is gonna, and it's not even, that was not a conscious influence for me or for you, as far as I know.
No,
but it's
definitely something
contemporaneous
to
the time period we're writing about, I think, right?
Yes.
Like
definitely.
The teens. So yeah.
Yeah, that was very much sort of that was even like sort of the comics language of the time.
Yeah, the story sort of alludes or has that same feeling as well.
Yeah, I love that about it. And then there's I think you and I, Rebecca, have talked previously about later, like sort of probably later on down the road, influence of just everything from, like you said, like classic fairy tale art to, I remember you and I talked about Mobius's artwork for the French Western Blueberry.
Oh, Blueberry was
as like a big influence.
Literally was looking at, I have scans of all of the Blueberry comics on my computer, and I literally was looking at them for every single page.
That was the first touchdown I came to when I read it for the first time, especially in a lot of like the more westerny bits, especially outside of when they're outside of. Do you pronounce where Greta lives as Sayre or Sear?
Sear.
Sear.
But
Sear, right?
You know, really, it's open to interpretation.
We'll go with Sear for now. Everything outside of Sear and even inside Sear to a certain degree has those great sort of like dusty golds and purples that sort of suffuse throughout.
Yeah, gosh.
Which I think really also helps to kind of punch up the magic when it happens, because the magic is so much more vivid and bright against those kind of dusty, soft palettes.
Yeah. Well, salt
kind of
as well, sort of the way that it's like salt saturates things. I feel like that was part of the concept for the art. And like the sugary tones for the Sugar Witch parts.
Yes, who Dee is is I think my personal favorite character. I love them so much. Kind of going along with that, I think part of a lot of the visuals and the way they carry out, I think help lend a lot to the story because there is a very dreamlike quality, not only to the narrative, but to the internal logic of the magic. I think especially when you have a story about witches, which Salt Magic, I think we can say is a witch story, pretty classically at its core.
Sure.
I think there's a temptation to get very explainy about like how the magic works and sort of like a concrete system. And I feel like Salt Magic isn't terribly interested in doing that. There's
that's because I'm not interested in doing that. I I think my editor wanted to have a much more thought out system of magic, and I just was not interested in going there. I find it really hard to even think about like that level of world building stuff hurts my brain. So I tried to just keep it very thematic. Like, how do I tell a story? The magic is really just coming out of like the characters' emotions and the characters' relationships.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it kind of, that's what lends it for me, that sort of very classic fairy tale logic, is the fact that the magic makes sense within the context of the story. If you stop and think about it for too long outside of that context, I feel like it starts to feel a little strange. But within the confines of the narrative, when you hear things about like salt crystals mixing with sugar crystals and how that can create sort of unexpected and slightly terrifying magical effects, it makes complete sense. And it sort of feels a part of that like sort of dreamlike logic.
Yeah, it's poetic.
Yes, it's poetic magic, very much so. Speaking of how magic kind of comes out of characters' relationships, this is probably a question for both of you. Maybe we'll start with Hope, because I imagine it sort of arose initially in the writing stage. The characters in Salt Magic are extremely complex, extremely dynamic. There's definitely, we have our protagonist, Von Seal, who is loyal and brave and very motivated, but who also lies and is spiteful.
Bratty.
And, very bratty, very headstrong. And then you have Greta, who could be, I think, considered our antagonist, who is, vindictive and possessive, but also inherently kind. She's one of the few characters that really, really tries to empathize with Von Seal and sort of meet her where she's at. The first thing we know about Greta was that she was enlisted as a nurse in the war. And I think it kind of goes from there. All the characters have these kind of aspects to them. Even Dee, who's very much a sort of I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that she's sort of like your classic Hansel and Gretel, like cannibal witch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even she has these like really unexpectedly nurturing instincts and helps in kind of unexpected ways. Can you talk a little bit about writing a story where there is all this conflict, but there are no like purely good heroes, there are no purely evil villains. Everyone is sort of complicated in really interesting ways.
Yeah. So for me, as the I guess the originator of the story, as the original outliner, I wrote it in my mid-30s. I just turned 39, and I was, I guess, 34, 35 when I wrote this outline. And I was going through this point in my life when I was like, I don't really know what the future holds for me. Like, I had gotten divorced. I had gotten into another relationship, which had then fallen apart as well. I wasn't really sure. I felt like I was kind of at a career crossroads as well. I knew I wanted to have a kid and be a mother, but I didn't know if that was going to be possible for me. And so for me, the three main characters, and for me, those characters are Von Seal, Dee, and Greta, are really like sort of the three paths that I could go down in a sense. Or really, like, if you want to just set Greta and Dee against each other, those are sort of the two main paths that I saw for myself. And one is like, okay, I'm just gonna do me. I'm gonna focus on my career and just living in LA and being a cool chick. And then Dee is more like that could be starting a family and, maybe alone, because I didn't know if I was going to have a partner. So that's what the story came out of for me. And not to spoiler too much, but I think Von Seal picks her own road that's really neither of those, which I like a lot.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Yeah.
One of my favorite tropes, which I feel like I don't encounter that often in fiction, is when the antagonist and protagonist are sort of mirrors of each other. Where, like you said, like I love the feeling of when they face each other, and you get this impression as a reader that like this could be Von Seal if she plays her cards a certain way. And the same thing with Dee. And like you said, I think she ends up picking sort of a middle path that is very uniquely her own. Rebecca, a lot of these sort of dynamics in comics, especially since comics are a visual medium primarily, they don't work unless you can really sell them sort of as an actor. Can you talk a little bit about sort of crafting the acting? I feel like all of the characters have their own sort of facial language and body language, especially when they interact with each other, that really, really brings home this idea of their complexity. Can you talk about some about the prep work that went into that?
Yeah, trying to think. Definitely that one of the things was that, you know, those scenes were already so clearly written out and sort of the intent was clear in the script stage. And I had tons to work with as someone who was like puppeting all of these characters. I felt like I knew what everybody was going for, and that informed the way I designed them. And since I was able to design them at a very early stage and spend a lot of time with them before starting the art, like Dee is very balletic. She's a little tiny ballerina. And so all of her posing is like, I'm thinking about her like a little ballet doll.
I can think of exactly one panel where she's standing flat-footed. The rest of the
literally,
time, she's like
she
up on
looks
her
like
tiptoes.
Yes, she's always in a position, and that is a theme that I just sort of tried to keep visually with her, and that is like her distinct body language. And then with Greta, she's all about like swoops and sort of the dramatic line. She's always just full drama. She's eating the furniture. She is here and you'll never forget her. Like that's her body language.
She's always sort of in the state of like dramatic wraps and shawls sort of falling off her tragically as she drifts from room to room.
Yeah, that's her whole life is just drifting from room to room, being tragic. And that, as an artist, that's just fun to play with. So once I sort of found that language, the rest of it was just having fun with that. And then Von Seal is a precocious little kid, and I spent a lot of time sketching like girls at that sort of age range, especially if they were wearing dresses, because I really wanted to get like her unsure sort of care, like the way she carries herself when she feels unsure, and the way she carries herself when she feels like determined, but the way a 10-year-old feels determined.
Sure. Yeah,
so
I mean,
hopefully
I think
that came through.
I think going along with her posing, like if you look at Von Seal through most of the book, whenever she is in movement on a mission, knows what she's doing, she also is never sort of standing straight. She's always at like a slight forward incline, as if she like is going downhill and can't quite control her momentum.
Yeah. Anytime the
that.
tension starts going, I really want everything to feel like it's tumbling forward.
Yes, and I think both the story and Von Seal as a character very much embody that of things are in motion, and not only can they not be stopped, but no one involved is interested in stopping them. Everyone sort of wants to see these through their natural conclusion.
And again, it does help that the story itself is just like paced perfectly. Everything is just every single page, something is happening. As an artist, getting a script like that, you just get to play. You just get to be like, everything is moving, and I have to make sure everything matches that energy.
Well, and so you brought up doing a lot of research, especially in Von Seal and how her clothes look. And that sort of leads me to another question I had, which is with all of the great fantasy trappings that are happening in the story, I think what really, really makes Salt Magic is that it is so firmly grounded in a very realistic sense of place and time and character. I guess first, I have a question for Rebecca about doing research into things like costumes and architecture. And I have a bit of a related question about the writing for Hope. What sort of research went into things like their outfits? I'm talking about everything from like the very practical farm wear of the Taggart family to Greta's like great sort of like 1920s movie star flapper outfits.
Yeah. Well, again, it starts as a collaborative process. Hope and I have like a shared folder on Dropbox where we Hope sent me like tons of sort of specific references for different parts in her script. So like, what are some specific ones that came straight from that? I feel like the way the men dress, sort of the like overalls look and the suspenders look, those came straight from like Gasoline
big,
Alley.
like mud boots.
Yes. And from photos from that time that I got, I think from either from books that I found at the library or from photos in that folder. You know, and like grounding it in that reality was tricky because it's a transitional time stylistically. And they are also, it's rural, so you can't really follow fast fashion. You can't follow high fashion.
Right.
Like
they're a couple decades behind whatever's happening in the world.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
you have to find the right feeling. And in that way, I feel like I'm not sure still if Von Seal's like coverall thing, her like petticoat that she wears over her dress is actually period appropriate. It just looked cute. And that's
you think it might be like too early, too late?
Yeah, it might be too early, I think.
I think it makes sense though, because as someone who I grew up in a very rural community.
Okay, yeah.
There is a grand tradition, especially in big families, which I also came from, of hand-me-downs. So that could still be a decades-old dress, and I feel like in fiction she would still be wearing that.
Okay, I'm gonna take that. Thank you.
It makes
I totally agree.
Sense to me.
A costume designer once told me that the cool thing about designing period stuff is that every person is not going to follow every trend, fashion wise, just like now. So I think you have a lot of latitude.
That's a really good way to put it. You're right. Yeah. And it was fun choosing like the way that each of the sisters dressed, because they do sort of each have their distinct style, and like the way Ma and Pa dress and the other people in town was all, you know, very rural, very, very plain. I looked at Fried Green Tomatoes, that film.
Yes.
The very first scene is set in the same year. And I think I just took screenshots from that scene. And
excellent.
Put those outfits on the people. Yeah. For Greta, that is a really cool time in fashion. Like late teens before the 20s actually is one of the craziest periods in high fashion, because it's not quite flapper, but it's also not quite Edwardian. They're starting to experiment. They don't quite know how to tone it down yet, so they just go all the way.
Yeah,
and
the one I'm
thinking
of
Greta.
specifically is I wonder if I can get it up on screen. This outfit.
There you go. Yeah.
This one right there.
Yes.
It's just this crazy stained glass gown.
Yes. I think I took that straight from a photo.
Amazing.
Or not a photo, a design, an illustration I saw somewhere, at least the coat. The dress is a combo of some things. But yeah, that kind of stuff, that's just me having fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's the fun bit, right? It's sort of just literally just playing dress up with
with our other books, with Hopes and our other books, they're set in the 1860s, and they're sort of set in reality, and everything has to be very plain. Like everybody is sort of dressed very like hardy and like utilitarian. And in this book, I was so done with that. I wanted to have fun.
Yeah, this is like party clothes.
Yeah,
so many party clothes, which I love it.
A lot of parties, yeah.
I'm sorry for writing so many parties, but I'm glad that you got to draw so many party clothes.
There's a fairly short list
pluses
of
and minuses.
There's a fairly short list of things that illustrators and particularly cartoonists will sort of go out of their way to avoid drawing. Parties, ships, and horses, and you somehow have managed to hit all of those in your collaborations. And you do amazing on every single one. Along with that sort of historical research, Hope that shows up in the writing just as much. The one that struck me in particular is in Von Seal's opening monologue. She just sort of casually mentions as an offside that her mother ordered their farmhouse from a Sears catalog, which is a thing I had to go look up to see if you were making that up whole cloth. And it turns out you fully could. You can order houses from the Sears catalog. They'll mail it to you, like Von Seal's has like a big jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, the Craftsman houses.
Yes, very much. How much does the research go into those?
Gosh. Well,
yeah, how did you find out about those? I'd never heard of them.
I think I just knew about them. I am not going to be able to remember the name of the museum, but there is, in Los Angeles, there is like this outdoor museum where they have moved all these old houses there. That used to be like downtown and stuff.
Amazing.
So they've transported all these houses and kind of made this little Main Street sort of thing almost with these antique homes. And a lot of them were, Sears homes that you could just order, and they would just send all the pieces. And so I did a tour of that place years ago, and the docent, the tour guide, was pointing out like little places where you could see like something didn't quite line up because it came out of the kit and it didn't quite meet perfectly, like the edges weren't quite right.
It had like warped in travel or something.
Or it was just like not cut exactly right because it wasn't cut on site. It was just sent to you and you just assembled it. So like like a jigsaw puzzle, sometimes you get a weird piece that doesn't quite fit and you have to like jam it in. So this was the house equivalent of that.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'm a big, I don't want to say I'm a history buff. I love period stuff. I guess I'm history buff light.
A history
like houses and fashion and slang and people's lives. Like that's what I like. I'm not like big on wars and politics, but I like thinking about the way that people would have lived in the past. So I think that's why I keep coming back to historical stuff again and again. And it helps that Rebecca is also really interested in that kind of thing. So
yeah. In that way, we're a very good match. Yeah. And the slang, you mentioned slang. Yeah, I always love the way that you write the dialogue and like make the slang feel very like weighted, but also like modern at the same time. It's always very good. It's a delight.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I probably stole a lot of the slang from Gasoline Alley. I mean, it was like the slang, you know, I assume.
Yeah, that was really good reference, that comic, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think Salt Magic is very much that kind of book where you sort of have this backdrop of the war that's just concluded, but it's not really a huge focus in the story. We're way more focused on these people who are living in a place where, you know, war will never really directly touch them. They're just sort of trying to eke out a living. Did you do a lot of research or have any personal experience? Again, as someone who grew up in a rural community with a big family, a lot of the Taggart's experience felt like a little too targeted of just like the compromises you have to make when you live in a big family, having all your extended relatives come by who all know you, but you don't know any of them as far as you know. For both of you, how much of that was like lived experience and how much of that was just sort of research and just good acting and good writing?
For me, it's all research and just acting and writing and pretend. I have a pretty small family and a small extended family. But I think I've always been kind of fascinated by bigger families since I don't have one. But Rebecca does.
Honestly, I only have that experience when I was younger. Going to like the family gatherings in the South, that it did have that feeling for sure. I felt like you captured it quite well.
There's a bit of a dance that happens. That's captured in the book, I think.
The wedding dance. Yes. Oh, that part was fun. What it actually felt like to me reading it was very reminiscent of other books I'd read. We've mentioned Little House on the Prairie a lot in our promos. Anne of Green Gables was another big book that I always think about. Those stories always have those like big town scenes or like group family events, and it's always like that where you're like, oh, that's your cousin, oh, that's your great uncle, and like weird stories and things happen. It felt very vintage in that way.
Yes, very much so. It's like I said, a very, very accurate feeling. I love the scenes at the wedding. I love the bits with Old Dell, which are the bits I think I'm specifically thinking of when I say that Salt Magic has elements of gothic horror, because he sort of embodies like the crazy woman in the attic, though he's an old man.
Yeah, totally.
Just an incredible cast of characters, and they also feel so unique, both in their dialogue and slang and in their visuals. I think you guys did a wonderful job with it. For a couple more questions, I kind of want to go back a little bit to the relationship between the core three characters you mentioned, Dee, Greta, and Von Seal. There's a quote that I think about a lot and talk about a lot. I'm reasonably certain it was said by Robert Eggers, who did The Witch, that horror film. I think he said it at a book panel, and it was something to the effect of the most reprehensible kind of fairy tale is the kind that tries to make young girls afraid of witches. And I think about that all the time, because in both modern film, modern novels, and even in classic fairy stories, witches have always been this great sort of analogy for female power and female influence. Yes. And depending on when those fairy tales are penned, depends on what shape that takes. Sometimes they're horrible, gross villains to be defeated. And then if you go to older stories, especially sort of Protestant era, I'm thinking about things like Vasilisa the Beautiful and Baba Yaga.
Yes.
Things like that, where they're dangerous, they're threatening, but they are people that you go to for advice or for help, who you need to watch yourself around, but can sort of give these young heroines access to an aspect of themselves that they have not quite reached yet. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that aspect of the witch's relationship with Von Seal, because she is very much a girl who feels cut off from her family, from her community, in a lot of ways from herself. She's kind of at that pivotal age where she's sort of crossing over from being the youngest in this huge family to considering herself a more independent adult. And I feel like the witches sort of fill an aspect of her upbringing.
Yeah, I mean, this is a book that's really about who do I want to be as an adult, which I touched on a little bit, talking about my own personal inspiration for the story. And these witches they're powerful and they're scary and they're not all good, but they're not evil. And there's a lot to admire. And you're right, Von Seal doesn't have a lot of people in her life who are any kind of female archetype other than like mother, or on that family track. And that's not what she sees for herself. So she has to go out searching for different role models.
Yeah, I think very much so. Rekha, did you want to?
I agree. I love that you mentioned Baba Yaga, because I thought about that, when I was reading up on sort of the psychology of fairy tales, at sort of parallel to working on this, that story came up because that story is about female intuition, and I loved the outline for this story from the beginning. And one thing that I loved about it was that it was so much about female power or about feminine power. In a lot of different ways, in all of these different aspects, and you had all of these different archetypes. And I think it's true that like a lot of fairy tales, witches are thought of as villains, and especially when we were doing like promo setup for this book, one of the study questions that was made for this book was that asking about Greta being a villain, about what kind of villain she is, and what makes her a villain. And I felt like that question was weird because Greta isn't a villain. She is an antagonist, but she isn't inherently evil. She's not this like one-sided character.
I think when we got those questions, that one made me go, did I make her too much of a mean girl?
Right.
Did I go too far? Because I don't think she
Or did I draw her too scary? Like, what's going on?
I just had to like look into my own heart and say, did I make this character something I didn't want her to be out of my own weird prejudices?
Sure.
I think,
classic archetypes that witches in stories always are.
I think it's also when you come into a story about a young girl who has to face off against a curse and a witch. I think we come in, especially in our culture, with a very sort of clearly defined set of where these people fall. And I think there was definitely a universe where Greta could have come off as a mean girl, except for what I was talking about earlier, where she is the only character who goes out of her way to empathize with Von Seal. Yeah. And at no point in the story is this portrayed as a manipulation or a trick. At no point does Greta try to manipulate or trick Von Seal. She's very upfront about what she wants, both from Von Seal and Von Seal's family. And I think more than anything, that is what makes their relationship work and what adheres them, not only as protagonists and antagonists, but as people who sort of belong together in the story, is that
they see eye to eye.
Each other.
They see each other.
At.
Also, the Greta demanding what she wants and not taking no for an answer kicks off everything going wrong. But
she actually does it a couple of times.
Yeah.
The other one is, oh gosh, I'm blanking on Dell's brother's name.
Jesse.
Yeah, Greta has a speech with Jesse.
Oh, that speech.
That I like a lot.
Yes, me too.
And I think for me, that's like kind of the core of Greta, is that speech.
It's basically that she wants her freedom.
Yes,
and that's portrayed by, or it's taken by some characters, their perspectives, to be the evil, or something dangerous. But it is not inherently to the story an evil or bad thing.
Yes, she's sort of framed as a villain by a lot of other characters, but I think the quote is something to the effect of, "I am accustomed to my freedom and I will not give it up."
Yeah, I think you're right.
But it's sort of said in the context of declaring her love to another character.
Yeah.
And when this is said to Von Seal, she sort of takes it like, that sounds nice. Because
that's exactly what she wanted from the beginning.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's what sort of endears her to Greta in the first place. And sometimes that endearment, leads to some different troubles. But people will just have to read to find out what those are. There's a lot of really, really great classical things in there. I don't think there's any like specific fairy tale. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Hope and Rego. I don't think there's any specific fairy tale or myth that's being referenced in the story. I couldn't pick up on any like cameos.
Yeah, we tried to come up with a fairy tale that it was like specifically like, and we kind of couldn't. We were stumped.
It's got echoes of a lot of the tropes, I think, but none that are like enough.
It's got some Ozian things.
Yeah.
But even that's very different.
I mean, I read a lot of fairy tales when I was a kid. Like we had lots of books of Russian fairy tales and just all kinds of different ones. 1001 Nights. So I read all that stuff, and it's all just floating around in my brain. But just
sort of that flavor is just sort of seeped in there.
Yeah.
Another one of the ones that I loved that I would love to talk about a little bit. We're coming up pretty soon here on Q&A time. Is this idea that I don't think it's too big of a spoiler to say it reoccurs a couple times throughout the story, where in really, really old myths and fairy tales, the land of fairy is the same place as the land of the dead. You have like old Celtic and Irish stories where you have like Tir na Nog and all these places where, you could meet with a cool elf lady and then also, your uncle who'd passed away years ago.
Yeah.
And that is an idea.
Who's brought that up? That's
that's a good one.
I thought it was a really beautiful element of the story, and I think becomes a rather important part as the story progresses. Can you talk a little bit? I think this both manifests both in the writing and like we were talking earlier, in the sort of odd dreamlike quality of the art. I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about sort of crossing those boundaries and getting that feel of, it's sort of part nostalgia, part mourning, part sort of celebration. If you could talk about that a little bit.
Do you want to go first, Rebecca? I feel like I'm just going to stumble into spoiler town, and also I
know.
There's some answers that are a little spoilery, I feel like.
We could be very general about it. The first thing I'm thinking of is like the party scenes where I think there are notes in the script that I started from, but what I wanted for the party scenes that happen in Seer, in Greta's magic land, which in itself, Seer is both physically somewhere out in the west in the desert, but also not physically anywhere. And so it didn't have to specifically look like any place. And that was fun for me because I sort of got to play with different geographical sort of cues from different parts of the west.
I think a specific thing that, and I would love for you to expand on this, is in Sayre, the surrounding area is very Western. It feels very Oklahoma still. It's like, oh yes, Von Seal could have ridden her on her horse.
Oklahoma, I feel like, is just lots of flat.
Very lots everywhere. Of flat, lots of like sagebrush. Whereas a lot of the architecture of Greta's palace is very French. There's like elements of sort of like Italian castles in there.
Yeah.
And it does feel very much like a place that is in the middle of maybe the whole world, that you could sort of ride off the boundary of Seer and find yourself anywhere.
Yeah, I never really wanted Seer to exist specifically anywhere. And I think that was something that probably Margaret, our editor, and I butted heads over a few times. I think she's very literal, which is actually super awesome when you're a little bit more airy-fairy like me as a writer, to have somebody ask those questions and bring you back down to earth, or make you say, I want to leave this a little more ambiguous. But I always wanted Seer to be in this nebulous sort of in-between space.
Yeah.
It's not quite in the real world, but you can get there. Fairy.
There's no specific path that Von Seal takes, and we spend no time at all telling the audience or showing them how she finds Seer. She just does.
Yes. That was one of the things I specifically went back and reread today to see if there was like a portal fantasy element where it depicted how she gets there, and she literally just rides there on a horse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we don't want. I don't think that we need to see that. Or I like the idea, and I really liked drawing the sort of wide open spaces, and I like the idea that it's just like it's this place like really far off if you just sort of keep going into the just like nothingness out there. But like the party scene is full of creatures that are like fantasy creatures, and in the script and the line is like they came out of the land, and they came out of the mirrors. So it's like a mix of fantasy and actual creatures that would live in the desert in that area, but that they've been anthropomorphized, and also people. There are just people there.
Yes.
So you're not really sure if they're spirits or if they're just people who live nearby who are cool.
Yeah, I think this is a big part of what
witches.
communicates. I think this is a big part of what communicates this idea of it sort of being this fantastical land of fairy and also the land of the dead, where there is this kind of like haunted remembrance quality to it. Where there's a scene. I also don't think this is too big of a spoiler. There's a scene where we get the story within a story where we see the story of these two brothers coming across this land for the first time, and they're confronted with all this strangeness, and they don't really react to it particularly strongly. But not in a way that feels strange. It's just like it sort of feels, like I said, very, very dreamlike. It feels like it's something that they would be dreaming, and it has that sort of dreamlike logic to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just rewatched Ponyo with my kid, and there's this scene at the end where there's like a bunch of stuff with an old folks home, all these old ladies who are in wheelchairs and stuff, and then at the end they end up in this underwater bubble kind of. And
a jellyfish comes and makes a little bubble
it's
around
like a
them.
giant underwater jellyfish with the old folks home inside, and they're just like, they think that maybe they're dead and they're in the afterlife because they're running around. They're like young people again, and they're not really questioning it particularly. They're just kind of going with it, and I think there's a similar quality to going to Seer in our book.
Yeah,
yes,
definitely.
Yeah. And there are some characters that successfully cross back and forth across that border. Von Seal, I think, not only for plot reasons, but for real reasons, and then also, of course, characters who don't manage to make the crossover. But we'll have to find that out when we read it.
Right.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that fantastic conversation. I feel like if you're watching and you haven't read the book, now you will want to, and you can buy it in that link down at the bottom. But we're going to move into the Q&A section. So if you have any questions, put them in that Ask a Question button down there. It's like there, roughly.
It's down there for me, but I don't know if I'm doing it the right way.
Right
here, there, yeah.
Maybe it's here.
You'll find it.
I see it. Oh no. Oh, I made it big.
Oh, yeah, it does
get
quite large.
I'm trying to have it so it's not covering somebody's face.
Oh, cool. We can see the questions.
But,
okay, great.
Yeah. What draws you to, should we just go for it?
Yeah. So Allie asked, what draws you to writing/drawing for this age range?
I like writing middle grade because it's a little bit more optimistic than YA. You're less getting into the nitty gritty of being a teenager, and especially writing more fairy tale and adventure type stories. I feel like it's a better fit than YA because you've got characters who are young enough that they're kind of just gonna go out on the quest, and if they were teenagers, they might be going out on the quest and like spending a lot of time thinking about who's hot, Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, that feeling of creating stories with characters who just sort of go for it because something is happening and they have to figure it out right now is a very young kids type of story. But it's an energy that I love, and I love continuing to work on these types of stories because that kind of character is fun to act and it's fun to write. And also, our stories or stories that in that age range are very all ages. Like they appeal to young kids. But what I love about ours in particular and others like them is that they have tons of adult characters. They have a wide range of characters, and everybody has their own problems. And you can sort of connect with lots of different aspects of the story, no matter what your age is.
Yeah, that's actually a really good. Sorry,
Oh,
that's a good point about the adults, because I think for middle grade age kids, they have like a different relationship with their parents than slightly older kids. I'm sorry for cutting you off, Ethan.
Oh, you're totally fine. It's your book. You should. Yeah, I was gonna say reading Salt Magic. I do think it operates on those levels, like where it's got. If you're a middle grade reader and you sort of want like a nice fantasy adventure, it's totally that. And I think it functions really well as an all ages story because you have these themes of loss and mourning. There's a recurring theme of lost time that ended up becoming very prescient. I think
recently became very prescient, didn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much
accidentally so. we wrote about something that just happened. What about the next question?
Yeah. Penny asked, what was something that was in the graphic novel to begin with that might have been cut out?
I can kind of remember things that were in earlier drafts.
I can't.
I remember there was more specific reference to, there's like a thematic link between Elber's time away at the at war. So he's gone for 2 years, I think, right?
Yeah. I think so.
Or maybe, and then that same time period is sort of referenced specifically later because of that link. And there's a link between Von Seal and Elber having an experience of that same time range because
duration,
and it's about I might be misinterpreting a very old memory, but it's something about the trauma of that lost time, or the trauma of what he experienced in that time is sort of like transferred to Von Seal in a magic spell, and that changed, I think, in the final version. It had more to do with like Elber's trauma and memories.
I'm honestly not sure. It
became a little bit more
drafts
open. Yeah, you did.
Of the script, and I feel like I have to just flush the old stuff out of my brain so I can keep a handle on what exists in the current draft.
Yeah, and it's not like I feel like that.
I don't think it changed radically.
It didn't really change radically, and that theme is still there. I think the theme of
it's still there.
Like lost time and the trauma of change and everything is still in the book.
All right, the next two questions go together, but I'm gonna read Courtney's first and then I'll follow up with Casey's. Courtney asked, how does your partnership help books develop? Do you feed off of each other and help guide the story/art with one another? What if you disagree?
Well, as far as collaboration, I love getting to see Rebecca's take on the characters visually while I'm writing the script, or even before I'm writing the script, which is what happened in this case, because it really helps me understand who they are. And that will usually inform the voice that I give them, the way I write them and act them in the script. So we're kind of inventing them together as people.
Yeah. And as an artist, it's so much fun to have like a lot of things sort of given as prompts, essentially, like having the story worked out simultaneously gives me a lot of room to play. And I love the back and forth that we got to do with this book, where I was starting quite early, and the things that I did get to directly influence, like the way the look of the characters played into some of the story points was super exciting because I didn't have to actually write any of it. I just got to do the fun drawing part.
Yeah, I remember you also sort of queried me on certain sections. There's a kind of a dreamy section with Von Seal later in the book.
Yeah.
And you wanted me to clarify what it was about. And that helped me to see that I had not been clear in either the script or in my own mind about what that scene was about.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember this?
Vaguely. I didn't until you mentioned it. You're right. Yeah, because it was very helpful to get your take on what it was about, because that did directly influence how I basically paced it out and like the way I showed it happening.
Yeah, and it's still pretty nebulous intentionally in the book, but I think it's grounded now in a way that it wouldn't have been if we hadn't had that conversation.
Right, and that was me asking specifically because I needed to know how it looked. And so those are the kind of questions that I do give Hope occasionally in this script and in our development. I'll be like, you know, I don't think that we need this, or can we clarify this visually, or like what was the intent behind that? And like, I think another thing is that I asked for like text boxes and stuff to be removed or moved around in this, because I would draw a scene and then we would have a text box that would label what the scene was. And I wanted things to be more silent in a lot of the like horse riding scenes. Essentially, a lot of those, I was like, can we just sort of take away the text and let these be visual? Those kinds of edits happened.
I'm not aware of any other collaborative duos where the writer actually letters the book.
That too, yeah.
But that was actually a pretty fun like role reversal for me, because after the art was all done, I went in and I had Rebecca make me a style guide for the balloons, and I drew all the balloons, and then you had me change some stuff, like move it around or whatever.
Like if I wanted the bubble to sort of like be centered in like a specific place because of the way I had drawn it, I'd be like, can we nudge this? And because you were doing it, we had to go back and forth with that.
Yeah.
Rather than just me nitpicking. And the lettering came out so great.
I'm so happy with it.
Yeah. It looks lovely.
Yeah, it was fun to do. I feel like I love seeing the page just with the lettering, because it finally all just comes together and it's final form.
And because we were able to go back and forth with it, the words and the art is really married in a very satisfying way. And also I didn't have to actually do the lettering, so it was great. It was a very equal collaboration.
Okay. Casey, in relation to that, Casey asks, would you work with each other again on another project?
Yeah, it would have to be the right thing, though. I feel like our books are this outlier in my own career for sure. They're like their own little corner. It's the Hope and Rebecca books, and they're not really like anything else that I do.
Yeah, it would be a project that came up that would say this is a Hope and Rebecca project. Yeah, I think, but like for now, like our next project is not going to be a collaboration. At least for me, my next project is going to be me going in my own direction. So we are setting sail.
Yeah, which I'm excited to see.
Yeah, I was gonna ask the sort of I feel like it's a sort of tropey end of panel question, which is what are you each working on, if you can talk about them? What's the next thing?
Yeah. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm working on a new book that I am also writing, which is interesting, and it is about ballet. So I basically took the parts of Salt Magic that I had a lot of fun with, which were the costumes and all of the sort of fabulousness, and I'm putting that all into one of its own book.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see that.
I'm having a lot of fun.
Let's see. I have another book coming out in, I think, February, something like that. All My Friends, which is I'm looking around for a copy of it, but I don't have a copy of it because it may not even be printed, or it may just be stuck on a boat. Yeah. So my next book is All My Friends, which is book 3 in the Eagle Rock trilogy, with All Summer Long and All Together Now. And then after that, I'm doing another book for Holiday House, which is kind of a hybrid book, which is a new thing for me. I'm excited about it. It's been scary. It's been hard. It's been really fun. I don't know when that's coming out.
What do you mean by
it's
hybrid
kind of
book?
It's like a mix of prose, comics, illustration. letters.
That's awesome.
It's a big, messy thing, and it's been a lot of fun. We'll see. It may be a disaster, but I don't even care. I'm having a great time.
Yes, excellent.
Well, thank you all so much for discussing your book and for chatting with these two, Ethan.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Just as we wrap up, could all three of you actually go through and say any upcoming projects that might be available for pre-order via Astoria Bookshop's website, and where people can find you on the internet, whether that's social media, your website, whatever.
You can find me on Twitter at Hope Larson. I am on Instagram at Despair Larson, and that's really pretty much it at this point.
Yeah. And buying Salt Magic down there.
Yes.
Yeah, please buy our book.
That would be great. You can find me everywhere at Rebecca Mock. So like Twitter, Instagram, other ones, and my website's RebeccaMock.com. Please pre-order, or you don't have to pre-order it anymore. Please order and read Salt Magic. That would make both of us very happy. That's pretty much it.
Perfect.
And you can find me on all and any social media at Ethan M Aldridge. And you can pre-order my book, preferably at Astoria Bookshop, The Legend of Brightblade, which was coming out February, will now be coming out 1st of March, because my books are also stuck on a boat somewhere. But it is coming soon. Thank you so much.
And if you're interested in any other events that we have coming up in the next 2 weeks, Thursday we have a shop talk panel with Aaron H. Aceves, and Adrian Thomas and Ryan Douglas, and they'll be discussing like writing and craft and that kind of thing. And then next Tuesday we have a tarot workshop, and next Thursday we have a spooky YA panel. So be sure to join us for those too. Yeah. So thank you three so much, and thank you all for watching. Have a great night.
Having us.